Hi YouTube, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. So today we're going to do a video on a knife handle tangs, okay? That's the, the part of the blade that continues on and is surrounded by your handle material. I've got a fella right now that's ordering up a pretty nice 52-100 kitchen knife, 8-inch chef class. We're kind of going back and forth a little bit about what kind of handle he wants. And I got to thinking about it and I thought, I don't know that I've ever actually done a video on knife handles and, why you build certain knife handles a certain way. And, that I remember first getting into knife making, a long time ago, and thinking one handle construction method was way, way better than another. And honestly, there's not one that's way, way, way better than the other. Each one of them has got their, like anything else in life, each one of them has got their strong points and their weak points. Ease of construction, tougher construction, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to try to make this video kind of on the medium side, and we're going to go through quite a few of them, okay? So the first one is your classic, I brought some of my kitchen knives out, your classic full tang design, okay? So this one right here, this is, my personal 8-inch chef, a 1095 blade, Cocobolo handle, no, some sort of a rosewood handle with brass Corby bolts. You can see around the outside of the handle that you can see the tang all the way through, okay? So this knife looks like this before you put it together, okay? Typically speaking, you've got a couple of pinholes or Corby bolt holes, and we'll go over Corby bolts here in a second, and then several holes of a larger size, throughout the tang. And these are for, they do lighten the tang up a little bit because steel is heavier than epoxy or handle material for the most part. But they're not really so much to lighten the handle up. They're to provide the epoxy a place to go from one side of the handle material to the other side, okay? So if you've got these extra holes right here, that means the epoxy can grip this side of the handle material, go all the way through the tang, and then grip the other side of the handle material. You can call them epoxy rivets. They do act quite a bit like a rivet. They've got pretty good strength going. They've got pretty good strength holding the handle scales like this, and they've got pretty good strength holding the handle scale like this, but they have actually got hardly any handle or hardly any strength going like this, okay? So something to keep in mind. Typically when I put any kind of, we call this a three-piece handle because you've got the blade is one piece, the scale is the other piece, and the other scale is the third piece, right? So a three-piece handle design, typically I want a mechanical lock that's going to lock those scales in like that, okay? The epoxy is great. Like I said, the epoxy has got strength this way, and which way did I just say? It's got it this way, and it's got it, what did I just say? I just lost my train of thought. But anyways, if you ever get into flexing that blade, okay, an epoxy rivet will just pop right off, okay? If you just put pins in there, like a regular pin, actually I can show this to you right quick. Now granted, this doesn't have epoxy in it, and the scales aren't fit up or anything, but okay, so we've got that pin going all the way through, right? So this scale can't go up and down, it can't go sideways, but the second you go like, see that? Okay, so without a mechanical lock going this way, your handle's fairly weak going, if you ever get into a prying or flexing the blade sort of a deal, okay? So typically, the locks that I like, a mechanical lock coming this way, in addition to the pins and the epoxy, The simplest one is just a pin. You know, you put the pin in, you cut it off to length. Once the handle is mostly shaped, then you beat on the end of the pin, it expands it, and you have a peened construction like this. Then you sand off the head of the pin, and it looks really nice. You can tell on this one, this is an 1/8 inch pin stock, and if I hold it up, you can tell that these were 1/8 inch pins, but they're quite a bit larger diameter now than 1/8 inch pins. That's because the head of that pin has been expanded, and so now it's acting as a lock going this way. So with this type of construction on a full tang blade, you can get away with a little bit of prying forces. Now that applies to the handle, not so much the blade. You know, handles will typically take an awful lot more abuse than what the blade will on a typically made knife that's a using knife. You start getting into hard use type knives, and then typically you build the blades both in the steel type, the heat treat, and the grind and the thickness and everything, and then you can get a blade that is absolutely tougher than the handle material, and then you start having problems if you push them really hard of handles coming off, and that pin construction kind of helps on that. There are other mechanical fasteners out there, loveless bolts, rivets to a point, and I don't really have any rivets around here. I don't really use those. Corby bolts are an exceptionally strong mechanical fastener that fastens one side of the tang, or one scale, through the tang and to the other scale. And they are, honestly, this is the cat's meow. So when you're building a 3-piece knife like this, well, actually we'll do this one because it's already set up. When you're building a 3-piece knife like that, and you need just as much strength as you can get, sideways like that, Corby bolts are the way to go. Now, I started using Corby bolts on big choppers, and I don't think I have a, hang on a second. Big choppers. I mean, this one isn't even all that big. I mean, it's about the size of a competition chopper, like a 10 or 11 inch blade, 1/4 inch thick stock. This one right here, I did something kind of funky on. I put thong tubing, for your handle fasteners, because I wanted to play around with the rear thong and try to play around with the forward thong. Anyway, so this one right here, it doesn't really have any mechanical strength like that, and you could see that it started popping loose up in here. So then when I started building choppers, I would use these big Corby rivets, or a Corby bolt. Now they have got a shoulder on them right here, okay? And then it's a stepped type of version, or step type of jobber. There we go. And so as you screw this thing in here, bam, these two shoulders, provide a really good stop. So to make a knife like that, what you do is you have to countersink the holes. And of course, this is just on the bench, so a little bit of that step sticks out. Then your scale comes on. Then the other half of the Corby bolt goes through like that, and that gets screwed together along with epoxy, and you've got a handle construction that is about, as long as you pick your handle materials well, and you get a good solid handle material like micarta, hickory, Osage orange, cocobolo, Bolivian rosewood, that type of tough as nails handle material, and you will have a handle that, I mean, when you go to replace these, you pretty much have to stick them on the anvil and with a 4-pound hammer beat them off, or throw a 36 grit belt on the belt grinder and grind the whole thing off. I mean, they're pretty much bullet. Well, I've never shot one, but you know the term bulletproof. Okay, so I started. I mean, I've made a whole bunch of kitchen knives with the Corby bolts on the handle scales. Okay, now during the whole the whole COVID thing, with all the shortages of materials and supplies and all that kind of stuff, I was having a heck of a time finding Corby bolts. I mean, honestly, having a hard time finding them really at any price, that was anywhere close to being reasonable. So what I ended up doing is now most of my full tang kitchen knives have got the peened pin construction, and I added that. They used to just have 2 Corby bolts, one here and one here. Now with the peened pins, they've got 3 of them. And for a kitchen knife, that's honestly plenty strong enough. You typically don't get into prying open painted shut windows or really levering hard pry bar type use on a kitchen knife. So anyway, so that's the construction, right? That is the construction of a full tang handle on, say, an 8-inch chef. Now, ease of manufacture. These blades right here are stock removal. I order big sheets of steel. I cut these out. I heat treat them, grind them, all that kind of stuff. So, these are just cut out. When they're just cut out like that, honestly, it really doesn't matter to me which way, as far as ease of construction. You can cut them out with the tang, and then just put the handles on the sides. That's easy enough. Or you can do the hidden tang design where you cut a shoulder, make like a little bolster thingy, and do a hidden tang type design, which we'll go over that in a second. So ease of construction on stock removal blades, honestly, it doesn't matter one way or another. Advantages. With a full tang blade or a full tang handle like this, you get to see the handle, all the way around. So if for some reason you ever, broke that handle off, you still have a whole handle to be able to use. Or if you throw it in the dishwasher and the handle scales warp really bad, and one of them ends up coming off, I can't imagine. You'd have to warp it really bad and then probably get up in there with a hacksaw and cut the pins or shear them to be able to get the handle completely off. But you've always got that handle. As long as you've got the blade, you've got the handle, right? Because there's no way that that's coming off. If you like the kind of more Western style handle shape, to me it's a little bit easier to make it like this, because you're not, you know exactly where the tang is, right? And that's really about it. Disadvantages of this type of handle construction is mostly longevity and the handle materials moving throughout the seasons with, changes in heat and humidity, and there's an awful lot of both of them in a kitchen, okay? So natural handle materials, well, actually all handle materials really, because micarta and G10, they are synthetics, but they will actually swell and contract due to heat and moisture, but to a much less degree than, say, like maple or something like that will. Okay, so on a full tang knife, you've got all this exposed steel all the way around, right? Well, that's a whole lot of places for moisture to get in between the handle material and the tang. Okay, anytime moisture gets in there, if it can't get out, now you're starting to corrode the inside of your tang. Okay, with today's epoxies and everything, as long as you're not soaking your knives, like putting them in a pan of water and leaving them overnight, or putting them in a hot pan of water and leaving them for, more than a minute or two, you really don't have much of a problem with that. But, I mean, it does happen. Another thing is if you're going from, if you make the knife in a very high humid place, okay, or if you use too green of wood that hasn't been seasoned properly, and then you ship that knife and then you grind it flush and sand it flush and where everything feels really good, and then you send it off to somebody who lives in the desert, then as the handle material dries out, it will shrink and you'll start feeling that tang right there, okay? And that's, it can be kind of distracting. It's certainly not going to hurt anything unless you're really, really bad case of it, and then you might have a sharp edge right there. So that part sucks. That can happen, like this one right here, my everyday carry knife. That's happened a little bit, and honestly, it didn't happen. Was this the knife that I took? I think so. I took this knife down south with me. I live in Wyoming where it's nice and dry. And I took this knife with me on a road trip down to Tennessee. And when I came back, I mean, the handle was nice and, all, perfect the way it was, right? But then when I came back, I noticed that I could start feeling a little bit of my fingernail would catch the difference in materials there. The only thing I can think of is that while I was down there, all that humidity and, all the heat and everything swolled up the handle material a little bit. And then when we came back up here, it shrank back down a little bit. And this is stabilized box elder burl. No, cottonwood burl. Yeah, that's cottonwood burl. So even being stabilized, it was still moving enough to be able to make a difference on that. Okay, so that's enough of the full tangs. So we'll get those kind of out of the way. Now, the hidden tang knives. These here are my two favorites. This one is 1095 and hickory. Hickory is a underloved handle material as far as I'm concerned. It can be very beautiful, and it's tough as nails. I mean, that's... you use it for axe handles, right? I mean, it's tough to get tougher than that, right? And, I really love hickory for knife handles. But anyway, so that's a very thin, what would you call that, a wabocho maybe? One of my first hidden tang type knives. And then this one right here is the newest tester. I think that's probably 150-ish, 200 layer-ish, just random pattern Damascus, and it's doing pretty good. And another cottonwood burl handle with a red and black linen micarta spacer and either a stainless or a nickel silver pin. This type of handle construction is, in my mind, it's superior to the full tang construction. Not that it's any tougher or that it takes abuse better or anything like that, but it takes advantage of the material's strengths a little bit better, okay? So like this, the stabilized burl, it's very beautiful, right? But as the story I told you with, my personal everyday carry knife, it's not the most stable thing in the world, okay? It also doesn't have a whole lot of strength to it. If you were to take, a piece of wood like this, a piece of cocobolo like this, right? And start, there is no way that a person is going to be able to take that piece of cocobolo and snap it like that, right? Now, this being cottonwood, if you had a piece of cottonwood that was that size, there's no way that you would be able to break it either, unless it was very, very old and very, very rotted, right? You take a piece of cottonwood burl that's the same size, and you go to snap it like that, And on a piece that thick, you might have to work at it, but there is a very good possibility that you could get it to snap. Okay. The reason for that is because burl it doesn't have a nice straight grain. Okay, and straight grain is where you get strength from in wood. That grain is, interlocked in everything, which you would think that might make it a little bit tougher, like an interlocked micarta or something like that, right? Well, in burl, it really doesn't. I mean, those are just extra break points, Every one of those little bitty lines in there is a part where it could break if you go to flex it too much. So a handle construction like this is actually a little bit tougher because it's in that you got a much bigger cross section, okay? You don't have two pieces that are small that you could probably break. You've got one chunk that's together, all right? So it's a much tougher method of construction for lighter handle materials, right? Also, since it is in a block form, it doesn't tend to want to warp as much with changes in temperature or humidity. Kind of for the same reason. If you were to take, now this is cocobolo, so cocobolo is pretty dang stable, but if you were to take like maple or something and throw that in water, chances are good it's going to warp. Okay, now it might not warp like this, okay, but it absolutely could, this end and this end could raise up a couple of thousandths and leave you a bow in the middle. All right, now a couple of thousandths might not seem like a whole lot, but on a knife like this, if it does bow up that much and the rest of your construction isn't solid, that might be enough to separate the handle materials from the tang. Something like this, it's highly unlikely that that's going to happen because it's a solid block. Okay, solid blocks don't take in moisture as much because they can't take moisture from the middle, right? Not like moisture from the middle here. Okay, so it's a block construction. On this knife right here, there's only two places that moisture and gunk can get into the handle from the outside world, right? One is around that pin, okay? Typically on these, I don't peen these pins because there's not really much of a need to, okay? You put the pin in while the epoxy's, still wet, and then it epoxies that pin inside the hole. On this type of handle design where you have the shoulder is cut, here. Okay, so you cut the shoulder into the tang, and then this, this is about as press fit as you're gonna get with micarta, okay? So you put that in there, and then you put like a little spacer on, and then you have a hole drilled in your block, and you put it on there, right? Now, once this is all fit up and, to its final dimensions and everything, then you drill a hole that corresponds to that hole through your handle material, and then a pin goes in there, okay? The second that pin goes in there, and the epoxy and everything cures, now you have a pretty dang strong mechanical lock between the pin. The pin won't let this move, right? The shoulder of the tang won't let this move. This piece right here won't let this move at all. So it's a very, very solid construction, and the only two places that moisture can get in are around that pin and around that joint right there. Which you can see, I usually get pretty dang close on these joints. They're, I could probably put them together without anything, and they would seal up mighty good. You saw me try to take this off of here. That's some pretty solid, it's on there, right? And then the epoxy fills up any more gaps. You put the epoxy in the hole, and then as you put the blade down, it squishes the epoxy back up. You set your pin, and then as the epoxy cures, it expands a little bit and comes up, and I've had it weep out of that joint right there, okay? So it gets nice and full. So honestly, there's not, I mean, you've got that much surface area for water to get into the tang. And with today's epoxies, it's not going to. And so this type of handle construction, I feel, is more superior for weather resistance, I guess, for a lack of a better term, because, you know, you're in a kitchen. You're constantly washing a handle, drying it, washing it, drying it, all that kind of stuff. So this type of handle construction, it is a little bit better for long-term maintenance. Now, if you look at, I just got to thinking, here's one. So here's an old hickory knife, right? Now, granted, these knives were not put together with the high-quality epoxies that we have available to us. I mean, they sell these knives for like, you know, 10, 15 bucks a piece, right? And I don't think I have a new model old hickory around here, but there's plenty of old ones. And you can see how, you know, when this handle left the factory, it was flush, you know, and now you can see how it's not anymore. And then as soon as it's, you know, as soon as gunk starts getting in there, then it just keeps getting more. It opens up a door, and everything else can get in there too. And you can see how, how there's gaps in between the blade and the handle material. That's what can happen with a very quick put together style of handle like this. With today's epoxies, if they used a good epoxy in here with epoxy rivet holes in there, you know, this honestly has got a pretty low chance of happening. If the wood, you know, was not, if it was sealed a little bit better, it wouldn't swell up and move around quite this much. But even at that, that style of handle won't do that sort of thing. Okay, this style of handle does take a little bit longer to put together. On a forged knife, where you're forging out a big old 8-inch chef like that, to me, it's a little bit easier to do the partial tang, just because you're not flattening. You know, you're flattening and keeping straight this amount of tang instead of that amount of tang. Okay, so on a forged blade, I do have a preference, and that's for a hidden tang type design. On a stock removal tang, honestly, I don't have a preference one way or another, except for I do think that this style of handle right here is better for long-term use. Balance. You can adjust your balance quite a bit by selecting, you know, either a partial tang or a full tang design. Okay, so let's say that on a normal knife, maybe not so much, because they're going to be pretty well balanced. But if somebody, let's say, wants a very, very thin nakiri, okay, I mean, nakiris are supposed to be thin, but sometimes you can get them really, really thin, okay? So let's say somebody wants a very, very thin and light nakiri blade, but they want a desert ironwood handle on there, okay? Desert ironwood is very, very dense and one of the heaviest woods that we have to work with, okay? If you were to take and put a nakiri blade with a full tang handle like this, and then load that full tang handle up with desert ironwood, you would have a very, very butt heavy knife, okay? Not that, honestly, I think that matters all that much. You know, you pick up a knife, and with about 3 or 4 cuts, I think your hand kind of gets used to the balance where it is and everything, and then you just work with it, right? But if you don't want that big old butt heavy, you know, knife, then you could go to either a lighter wood, or you could go to a partial tang and save some of that weight, a little bit skinnier handle, and you could pull it off, and it could, you know, be a good knife. On the other hand, if somebody wanted a, you know, a really heavy blade on an 8-inch chef, you know, say a heavy grind and everything, and then they wanted a very, very light wood, like say, you know, curly maple or something, then you would probably be better off to pick, you know, a full tang handle design, and that way it put more weight in the handle to be able to kind of balance the knife overall a little bit. So I think that's, oh, one more thing, and this doesn't really have to do with kitchen knives, but when you're making hunting knives, my preference there is if you're going to have a guard, it works better on a partial tang. Okay, so pretty much what that knife right there looks like, this is my personal hunting knife, it looks like that, only instead of using a piece of micarta, I used some mokame, which is nickel, silver, and copper pattern, for lack of a better term, forge welded together and patterned out, and it's some pretty cool looking stuff. But anyway, so there what you use is you use that brass or mokame or Damascus or whatever you want to make, and then just extend it down and curve it and make a guard out of it. Okay, do the same thing with like a big chopper, or I guess you could if you were making a sword or something and you wanted you know, a long extended guard, or if you were making you know, a katana and you wanted, you know, more of a regular guard like this that overhung the handle and didn't stick out in the front. That's how you make those. So yeah, I think, oh, one more thing. As the knife gets smaller, it's typically better to go a full tang handle design, okay? Because like if you were to try to make this little paring knife and make it a hidden tang, boy, you'd be there for a while trying to figure out how to get all that small. Plus this is 16th inch stock, which if you're making a hidden tang, you have to be able to get tools in there to be able to make that slot, okay? So on spacer material, you can just do it with a, you know, a razor blade or a chisel. You know, you just chisel your way through there. But on, you know, micarta or brass or anything like that, you've got to have enough width to be able to get your files or your end mills in there to be able to cut that slot to be able to get the blade to pass through. And 16th inch stock is, frankly, it's not going to happen. So the narrowest, or the skinniest blade that I can make on that is 3/32, and that's the smallest end mill that I have. But as you get smaller and smaller like that, it's just better just to do a full tang type of knife, just because you know, I mean, if you were to make a hidden tang in there, see how thin that tang would have to be to still be encompassed all the way around with handle material? I mean, it'd be mighty dang thin. Blades like this right here, that one would be kind of a tough one to get that shape in a hidden tang. So these are almost always full tang. So I guess that's kind of a quick overview of tangs, and mostly kitchen knife tangs. I guess if you have any questions, or if there's, you know, big things that I didn't bring up, you can leave them down in the comments. You know, I might answer those, or, you know, if it's a big enough thing for a topic, I might go ahead and shoot another video. So, so yeah, that's kind of kitchen knife tangs in a nutshell. So again, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. Visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and we will see you next time.